This is Lee. I'd like to say a few things about wrestling video games. I, of course, enjoy the video games that you have produced. I also have some admiration for some wrestling video games. Unfortunately, many of the professional wrestling video games in particular, over the years have not been very satisfactory. I've noticed that many of them have a very limited application of skill. They seem to be very random and involve just pressing buttons very fast and that sort of thing. They are not very interesting, and they seem kind of dashed off just to make a quick buck, if you will, to use the lingo. But more recently, I've experienced the Fire Pro Wrestling series, primarily on the Dreamcast, the Fire Pro Wrestling D for Dreamcast, I suppose, and the Fire Pro Wrestling Returns for the PlayStation 2. And those were quite wonderful, quite enjoyable. I enjoyed the timing-based grappling system, which added a layer of skill, the versatility of the Creation Suite allowing many real-life wrestlers and fantasy characters to be created. A few years ago, there was a great exchange amongst the community. Fire Pro Club is still around, but their forum doesn't allow new registrations. These games were just very entertaining. Even though the graphics were not top-notch, they were more a throwback to the 90s with the two-dimensional sprites as opposed to three-dimensional polygonal characters. I played the TNA Impact Wrestling game produced by Midway for the Xbox 360. This was fun, but limited. I could see that this was a game produced near the end of that company, and it probably could have benefited from a year or two more development. It seemed kind of rushed, and there's just not a lot of options. The single-player portion was good. It was interesting, kind of had an interesting story of your character, but the online play, the servers were all down by the time I got the game. There just wasn't anything to do. So that was a bit disappointing, and there was another game called AAA Heroes that used the same engine. I never played this, though. It didn't seem to be that much of an improvement. WWE games, of course, are probably the most well-known. In the modern age, WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, which was produced in 2005, I picked up this game because of reviews, people saying that it was so good. It was very good. But a game that was better was WWE 2K14 for the Xbox 360. I've played this game for a number of months, and it requires much more skill, I think, than the previous game. It's much harder to cheat, if you will, with the buttons. Unfortunately, there are people online who take advantage of the game and cheat, using hacks, as they call them. Hacks, more like script kiddies, I believe is the insulting term. People who break the rules with the game's code in order to win with no effort. But for the most part, I found that the online community is very patient, very competitive, friendly. Most people are willing to work out their grievances in the action as opposed to screaming at one another. Sorry, I'm just recalling some funny conversations that we had. Well, anyway, WWE 2K14 was quite fun. Another benefit of this newest series, WWE 2K15, I avoided it because from what everyone said, from the reviews and information, it seemed as if it was a step back from 2K14 in terms of mainly the Creation Suite, which was one of the largest selling points for me. The divas in the game are extremely limited, and the use of diva matches is very slim. It just seems like no one's playing as them online. However, there are certain creators in the community, if you will, players of the game who passionately create so many different characters. And even if you don't get the DLC, downloadable content, you can just really have a ball just enjoying all the mini creations that people have made, even with the limited creation tools, the custom arenas and custom characters. In 2K14, there are two users in particular I'd like to recognize by name. Thunder Skull 99 and Mr. Black Sheep 008, or 08. The two of these individuals have created a vast number of very accurate-looking female professional wrestlers from the Shimmer promotion, from Chikara, from Lucha Underground, the Joshi promotions, especially from Thunder Skull. And these are quite wonderful. Taking them together, you could have hundreds. You could create entire rosters and federations to use in the WWE Universe mode. And it's almost as if you have a women's wrestling game at this point. There were many women's wrestling games produced in the past. I think all of them were produced in Japan. But the most recent one came out for the original PlayStation. So if you don't speak Japanese, if you don't have access to the right modifications or the hardware, you just can't enjoy this. But thanks to the efforts of fans like these, you can enjoy them with the modern engines. And I have no doubt that if WWE 2K16, which is scheduled for release in about a month, if that is to come out, then I'm sure that people with this kind of talent will continue to promote it through their own creations. So, in short, wrestling video games are quite fun, even if you're not a fan of wrestling. In fact, I was not a fan of wrestling originally, and I loved wrestling games. And I think they've only gotten better over time. So, if you like video games, I would check them out. But think of them as fighting games, not as sports games. You'll see what I mean when you see them.